Thank you, Christopher. Peter, the next 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you. The lesser breeds without the law were the Germans. It was the law that they were outside that made them lesser. I just thought I had to add that. Right. Consequences of the Iraq War. $6 trillion, which the United States does not have, expended. Iraq, under the control largely of the Ayatollahs of Iran. The resort to torture by the United States, often by proxy, but not always. Disgraces in themselves and disasters. An untold number of innocent people killed. The certainty that the United States is unable for the foreseeable future to mount a justified military operation abroad. The diminution of the moral authority of the Western democracies, again, for the foreseeable future. Fantastic. What more could you ask? Resulting from deliberate ignorance of the past, deliberate willful ignorance of the past, of Britain's own attempts to control and exploit and govern Iraq through fake parliaments and fake elections, at least more successful for a while in gaining the cooperation of at least one of the Iraqi factions without necessarily having to pay them to fight by the day with AK-47s against our enemies instead of against us. Again, triumph. I really do not see what justification there could be of the operation on its own merits. But if it is a principle that the United States has to intervene in every country which is misgoverned, where there are despots, where there is torture, where there is no freedom, then where else can anybody in this room think of that we might be intervening? For instance, the sight of the Summer Olympics might occur to some, but we do not. Nor if we're terribly tender about the massacres of Arabs by Arabs, or the citizens of Arab states by other Arab states. Why is it that we accepted as our allies in the first Gulf War the state of Syria, whose then president, Hafez al-Assad, ordered his troops with artillery to surround the town of Hama and shell it until everyone living in it was dead? If our principle is that we only associate with nice foreign regimes and we always attack and devastate nasty ones, where was that principle then? None of it makes sense. None of the objectives turned out to be true. When I was in Iraq for the first time, only a few weeks after the invasion, people crowded round me in Najaf and Kabul saying, and many of them spoke English, they said, "Thanks very much indeed for coming. Now will you please get out?" And that was the nicest thing that anybody said to me all the time I was there. How can anyone stand here and say that this is a success? All I can say is that it must take the most enormous courage and resolution to continue to stick to an obviously losing argument.
Well, it's obviously come to the actuarial. Seems a waste of Hitchensism in a way to just reduce things to the balance sheet, but we do balance sheet, we'll do balance sheet properly. Let me suggest some things to you. First, everybody knows that there isn't a single clever person here who doesn't know, is there, or watching this on a webcast, who doesn't know that you can't mention weapons of mass destruction and Saddam in the same breath, even though he used them against Iran and against the Kurds, wrongly described as his own people within the borders of his own country, and was continuing to incubate and maintain the capacity to recover them. However, for actuarial purposes, let me just say that having enforced the resolutions that governed this question in the case of Iran, we forced the capitulation of Colonel Gaddafi, whose stock of WMD we had underestimated. When he came in, and he didn't surrender, I might add, to Kofi Annan or Jacques Chirac. Where did Colonel Gaddafi come a few weeks after the fall of Baghdad to say, okay, you can take all my stockpile now and put it in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where it now is, which is where it should have been. He didn't come to Kofi Annan. Hold your applause, comrades. I know I'm never going to get any from a... but thanks for trying. I sort of appreciate it. He didn't come to Kofi Annan or Jacques Chirac or the prostituted, equally prostituted Gerhard Schroeder, the real blood for oil pimps and prostitutes who constituted the leadership of the anti-war movement in European politics. No, he came to Tony Blair and he came to George Bush. So I give up. Okay, let's have a look at this big stockpile that Colonel Gaddafi's got all this time. It's bigger than we thought. Much bigger than we thought. We accused him of a lot. It was much worse than we thought. As it had been with Saddam Hussein at the time of Kuwait. Much worse than we thought. Well, let's have another look. Where's he got it from? Where's it come from? It's come from North Korea. And it's come from Pakistan. Pakistan, our ally. So by walking back the cat, as it's called in Washington, we discover from this capitulation the AQ Khan network. We shut it down. Or at least we put its leader under house arrest. At least for now. At least we put the North Koreans in the frame, and they know we've got them. This is the biggest non-proliferation victory there has ever been for any US administration ever in history. That's the first thing. The second is we catch the guy who rolled Leon Klinghoffer off the deck of a cruise ship in the Mediterranean, who avoided arrest when he was caught, had to be released, because he was traveling on a diplomatic passport. A what passport? A what passport? A diplomatic passport. What diplomatic passport? An Iraqi diplomatic passport. Just like Abu Nidal had been traveling on, just as like every other terrorist gang you've ever heard of in the Middle East had been headquartered in Baghdad. We shut that down too. You think this is nothing? You think it's nothing. You want to sneer at it and say, Bush says, mission accomplished? Sneer. Go on, sneer. These achievements are real. There are four reasons for which a state, previously sovereign, may lose its sovereignty, may be deemed to be outside the law. They are four. I'll recite them quickly. 1, violations of the Genocide Convention, which we have signed. And by the way, by all means, let's impose this on Sudan. And by all means, let's impose it on them for Darfur. And on China for many other offences too. Because just as China has backed Saddam Hussein, and just as it backs Robert Mugabe, and just as it's backed the worst elements in Burma, so it has been behind many of our woes in the Middle East. So that's the first thing. The Genocide Convention may not be violated. We've signed it. It mandates that you must move to punish or prevent genocide. Second, a regime loses its sovereignty if it violates the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iraq has used weapons of mass destruction on its own territory and on the territory of others. Third, you may lose your sovereignty if you give aid, comfort and harbour to international terrorist groups. Iraq is multiply convicted of this. And fourth, for occupying and invading the territory of other nations, which Iraq had done several times, continued to do and was intending to do again. This is not, unfortunately, the case with all the despots we'd like to get rid of. The cheap point that Peter ends with, saying, if you're going to do Saddam Hussein, don't you have to do anybody, must reach the critical standard I've just mentioned. The 4 great offences, repeated, flagrant, gross and intentional, and going to be repeated, all of them again. It was essential that we move Iraq and the region into a post-Saddam Hussein era, and the woes that have fallen upon us, the second thoughts we're bound to have, the worries about the blunders that we made while doing it, none of which I would deny, and some of which I know more about than you could dare to know. I know things about what went wrong that would curl your hair. Still, none of these can impeach the idea that we did it not too soon, but much too late, and that only therein lies our shame. Thank you.